Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about those labels we use to describe ourselves that stick and suck. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 1 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife happiness mentor, and I am so glad to be here with you again. So today I'm coaching you on something I've heard a lot over the years, and for some odd reason, I've heard it a ton lately. I'm talking about the way we label ourselves. You know, what you call yourself, to yourself, in your mind, and sometimes to others too. It's the way you summarize something about what defines you. You might describe yourself in a certain way, kind of like putting yourself in a box. It's the way you think about who you are, your identity, or part of your identity. The thing is, sometimes you do this in a positive way, like maybe, yes, I'm creative, or I'm really musical. And this kind of labeling isn't usually problematic. Today's topic is more about when your labels aren't useful to you now, at your age, with your goals. Those kind of labels. And I have a feeling you may even have one of your personal labels in your mind right now. So hold on to that thought, because just quick, did you know that there's a fun way to hang with me and some other listeners of the show? Well, there is. And I'm excited to invite you to amplify your listening experience with the podcast by having more of a book club experience with all of the midlife stuff that we're talking about here. This is perfect for you when you're craving connecting with more women in the middle. You can join the Women in the Middle podcast club by just going to susierosenstein.com and just go ahead and click the podcast tab and you'll see podcast club listed there. Just click and away you go. That's where you join. Remember, if you're listening in real time, it's on sale. What are you waiting for? Let's do this. Okay, now here we go. Today's episode is all about personal labels, not the kind you iron on, but the kind you use to identify your strengths and weaknesses. But as I mentioned, mostly weaknesses, or at least that's what I'm coaching you on today. If you have a label or two for yourself, don't worry, you are so not alone. It's a common way that midlife gals become all mean girl on themselves. But it's more than that. Labels can be like 8 octopus arms with suckers, far-reaching and sticky. And my friend, I just looked that up on Google and I had to try so hard not to go down the rabbit hole of cephalopods, squid, arms, tentacles, and the like. But I think this analogy works. Labels like this tend to be far-reaching, like the octopus's arms, in that you may apply them to different parts of your life, not just one thing, but they can creep and they become bigger. They have great reach. And labels stick like the octopus suckers, because whatever you're thinking now, maybe it was something that you started identifying with as a child, and maybe it was something that somebody said to you when you were a kid. The labels can stick for years. Make that decades, actually, at our age. I'll give you 2 examples. First, here's a positive one that is useful. It was useful to me. When I was in high school, somebody commented on my legs. It was a compliment that I had nice legs. Let's say I was 15 or so. So that would be about 41 years that I have labeled myself as someone whose best asset is her legs. I don't recall ever thinking that about myself when I was young. So since then, I catch myself thinking that, well, at least I have nice legs or something like that. It's useful because when I think about it, I feel confident. And then I look for evidence of how I kind of lean into that gift. Like my favorite outfit in the summer is to wear a skirt. And I like to do certain exercises where I can enhance what already looks decent. So it's like a big bang. It's kind of the way I embrace going up and down the stairs too in the house. I kind of stand on my toes a little bit to get a little bit more leg exercise happening, or coming back from Costco, going in and out of the house a million times and up and down the stairs to get the groceries and put them away. And I always think about how it's strengthening my legs. In fact, I start by feeling negative about it, and then I'm like, no, it's strengthening my legs. So I don't use that label against myself. It works for me. And here's another positive one that I just remembered as I was writing these notes. It's from my early 20s. I had a friend who was going to teach me how to drive standard. Learning to drive standard seemed impossible and incredibly daunting to me. I psyched myself out well before sitting in his sporty car. He told me to think about all the people who drive standard and to consider that I was at least as smart as, if not smarter, than some of them. For some reason, when he told me that I was smart, it meant a lot and it really stuck. And from that moment on, not only did I drive around the block in a standard car, but not much farther than that, I also started to feel more confident about my intelligence and my capacity. Something so small like that helped me shift my identity and label myself in a useful way for me. On the other hand, there are a few negative ones too. They are very busy bringing me down, like a good negative label has the potential to do. The big one over the years started out with a rumble and gradually got louder and louder. The label is pathetic at technology. It started in a computer lab in high school in 1980 or so. Some mishap with the floppy disk. I thought it was so scary back then too, because it seemed like one mistake and all of your work would disappear, which felt like an explosion to me, like something really big and really bad. And then the tech-sucking experience moved into the TV remote land, and finally, and most importantly, it continued to morph into sucking at tech for my business. The thought I suck at technology really shined as I became an entrepreneur, and for sure with this podcast. Now, with a lot of coaching, I practice a new thought on purpose that is much more useful for me, which is I'm learning to manage the technology I need for my business. But my friend, remember when I mentioned that far-reaching situation with the octopus arms? That thought morphed and applied itself to yet another realm, all the way to the airport parking garage in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A couple of months ago, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of a rental car, looking around completely flummoxed because I couldn't figure out how to start the car or drive the car out of the parking lot. I had to get the guy. And you know what I was thinking. I suck at technology. And that I was old and I missed the memo about new car technology because I drive an older car. And I was also thinking about my son who was sitting right next to me and how much fun he was going to have with this one. I don't know who he was going to tell. For sure he was going to tell his brothers. Anyway, I think you can see with these examples that some labels can be useful and some labels are not useful. Because of your amazing possibility of getting better and better at mindfulness and being aware of your thoughts, you have the ability to manage these thoughts and labels like a boss and learn to think on purpose in a way that serves you. So let's take a look at what's going on with midlife labels and us midlife gals. First, at a high level, what we're really talking about are expectations, but rather than having expectations of others, labels are expectations of ourselves, the kind of labels we're talking about. As I mentioned, labeling yourself can be harmful for several reasons. They can really bring you down and hold you back. Labels can have a pretty powerful impact on you personally because they often limit personal growth. Have you heard the expression fail in advance before? This is what that expression is getting at. When you think about being bad at something or limited in some way about whatever it is, you might quit right off the bat. Your self-perception is that you just don't do things like that well, or you're just not good at this or that. You might even think that you have a predisposition for being bad at it. And when you really get ingrained with your label, it might also affect how others see you because you might be talking about it all the time. You may not just be quietly labeling yourself. It may come out in conversation. And you talk about it as if it's true. Here's what I commonly hear. I'm not creative. I'm not organized. I'm anxious about traveling alone. I'm terrible at cooking. I'm not a good planner. I'm not a morning person. I suck at morning routines. I'm a late person. I can't lose weight. I'm bad at relationships. I'm not good at making friends. I'm shy. And I suck at technology. Yes, it turns out I'm in the best company with this label. It comes up all the time. So here's the thing. It's not that you don't have evidence for some of your labels or the way you think about yourself. I'm sure you do have some evidence, But my amazing friend, you also have some evidence that it's not absolutely true all of the time. And it brings you down and helps you shrink away from the possibility of being anything other than what you think is true. So here are some of the key issues with labels like these. First, labels create limitations for you, and those limitations are created by you in your mind. You squish what's possible for yourself right off the bat. When you label yourself, it might feel like it's just the way things are, and the result of this is that you aren't as likely to dream big or push your way forward because of the power of the way you're thinking. That's all related to the label. It's kind of like you surrender or give in to the label, even though it's not helping you. It's kind of like you just end up proving the label true, like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something like that. So for example, if you're thinking I suck at technology, you may not appreciate that there are some kinds of technology that you're actually good at, or could be good at, or even like, because you're subconsciously looking for evidence that you suck. And it's beyond your imagination that reality could ever be different than that. Second, labels can keep you stuck and keep you small. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably the type of gal who loves self-development and opportunities for lifelong learning. That's all about growth. Labels get in your way. They act like cement and keep you in place, not growing forward and thinking about what's possible. You may even feel like the label is more ingrained, embedded, or difficult to change. You start just accepting seeing yourself this way, and it makes you less curious and open. You challenge the label less than you might if you didn't have it. You kind of get stuck to a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Not great, that's for sure. So the first thing is that labels create limitations for you, and that those limitations are created by you in your mind. And the second point is that labels keep you stuck and keep you small. And third, negative labels create a lot of negative feelings about yourself. Some labels can create really powerful negative emotions that bring you down because they create feelings like shame, maybe hopelessness or inadequacy. For example, those are just some, but like they're quite negative. And as a coach, I've also heard labels like being unlucky or a failure or lazy. This kind of stuff, as you can imagine, labels act like shortcuts sometimes and become top of mind and easy to focus on because they're like go-to thoughts. They're just there, and you go to them all the time, so it's just easy to grab. They're at the ready. And the other thing is that you probably connect more with your labels than your overall amazingness, which is complex and multifaceted, like the fabulous woman in the middle that you really are. So this kind of stuff is really important to be aware of. So that's a general overview of why labels can be a big negative deal in midlife. If you are thinking about one of your own labels for yourself, please remember you are totally not alone. I hear about labels all of the time. They just flow out of my clients' mouths as if they are truth. Very, very common. And I just mentioned a bunch that came top of mind, but there are many more labels. So if you've got something going on with the way you think about yourself that I didn't mention, I know you're still not alone, so don't worry about it. Just try to become more aware of it. I remember the first time a coach pointed out a label of mine, and I was floored. I had no idea that what I was thinking was an optional thought. I stated it like it was a part of my DNA. I said, and I quote, "It's harder to lose weight because I'm only 4'10". Now, I did not bat an eyelash, not one. Like my height was a genetic defect, making it harder to lose weight. It makes no sense, but there I was for 44 years at the time of this label being pointed out to me, thinking about myself this way as a woman who couldn't lose weight because of her height. That is, a woman who couldn't lose weight. Now, can you see the power of this stinky thought? I failed in advance, and I didn't see that weight loss, even a couple of pounds, was possible for me too. I was wrapped in this label, and it stuck to me for decades. As your midlife coach, I have a superpower to find thoughts like these, labels like these that don't help you grow the way you want to. It's a classic case of how you might be getting in your own way. If you heard a friend or loved one speaking the way you do to yourself, you would notice. you would probably say something too. You wouldn't want them to think this way about themselves. And the alarm bells would ring for you because you would likely be concerned about the damage thoughts and labels like these could create. That's what would happen if you heard somebody else thinking this stuff. I'm sure you would notice at some level. Well, you're right. They are damaging. And there's good news. Thoughts and labels are optional, and you have the power to be curious about why you're thinking this way and make some intentional changes. So here's some help, some easy steps to remember. Here are 6 things you can do to teach the octopus to keep his arms and suckers to himself and let you grow the way you want to. The first thing is to find your thoughts and labels. Ask yourself, what have I thought about my weaknesses for a long time? How do I talk about this both in my mind and to others? And the second thing, write your thoughts and labels down. Use these questions as journal prompts and allow yourself to relax and do some writing and some thinking. You can also review the common labels I mentioned earlier in the podcast and see if any of those resonate with you. The third thing, notice how each thought and label makes you feel. Get quiet and repeat the thought or label to yourself. Be still and notice your feelings. And number 4, remind yourself that you're not your thoughts. Noticing them this way helps you become a watcher of your thoughts, so it's easier to see that they are separate from your identity. They are optional. And number 5, be curious about what you're thinking, about the truth of the label and how the label makes you feel and what it leads to you doing. If your label was always late, ask yourself, is this true? Are you always late? Can you find a time when this wasn't the case? Maybe you get to doctor appointments on time or make your flights on time. That's evidence that you're not always late. So when you really aren't the label, always late, or a late person, then notice your feelings. First, how do you feel with that label? And then how do you feel without the label? Also take time to notice how you show up when you think of yourself with that label, how the label makes you feel, and what you do when you feel that way. If you think you're a late person, how do you notice you show up? If you think that you're not always a late person, how do you notice that you show up? And likely, there's quite a difference. And finally, number 6, decide what kind of woman you want to be on purpose with regard to your label. If you had a thought that you were a late person and you don't like that about yourself, how do you want to show up instead? As someone who's learning to plan better in advance? As someone who respects other people's time? As someone who's working on being more in the present moment? As somebody who loves being punctual? It's completely personal. It's whatever you want it to be, whatever your label is, but you can have fun with it. This can be a really creative, fun, exciting thing that you can do. It doesn't have to be a total drag. But these 6 steps will help you free the octopus's arms and suckers from keeping you stuck. But any which way, you get the picture. Raise your awareness of your thoughts. Notice how they make you feel. Remind yourself that you're not your thoughts. Be curious about your labels. Decide how you want to think about yourself on purpose. Be thoughtful about it all and enjoy who you are and who you want to become. You deserve it. And if you need help with thinking more intentionally about who you want to become, making a midlife transition, a tweak, an adjustment, or a change yourself, and want to understand how mindfulness can help you get out of your own way so that you're happier overall, I'm your gal. It is way more fun to do this together. Okay, my friend, that's it for this episode. Now, as you know, this podcast is all about how to love your life again after 50. It's really all about coaching you to become more intentional and to incorporate mindfulness into your life as a regular practice. This is how you put yourself on your agenda. My focus as your midlife coach is to help you get unstuck, clear, and focused on your current values and priorities so you don't have regrets. I can help you create the confidence, courage, and meaning you're looking for. Are you ready to learn more? You're invited to book your momentum call at www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com, and we'll talk about how I can support you. You're also invited to purchase my new masterclass, Get Unstuck, Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy, where you can get clear about your next chapter priorities without spin, confusion, and overwhelm in less than an hour. Head over to www.midliferoadmap.com. And a small request, if you feel so inclined, you're also invited to leave a podcast review, which would be much appreciated and help other midlife gals find the show. Finally, for show notes and links, head over to www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 375. You'll also see links there for my new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you next week.